Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Rotation here on the ROKKR YouTube and podcast platforms. My name is Ashley, aka and I'm happy to have you guys here tonight. I've had a listen, I EMP'd myself. I guess I went over on my internet usage, my regular just internet. I've been watching too many movies. I don't know what's been going on. But basically, I have a cap on my internet. I just learned that. It's official. And yeah, so that's why the stream's a little late here to get started. But hey, I made it. You'll love to see it. So anyway, I'm Ashley, aka MiDNiTE. That's my terrible problem right now. But I'd like to kind of give you guys an introduction to my co-host and our guest this week. This is actually the first guest episode for the rotation. Like, this is kind of like a newer podcast we just started, but you are our honorary first guest.
No pressure.
LandO, so welcome. No pressure.
I appreciate
that.
As usual,
Thank you. Heck yeah, absolutely. As usual, I've got IKON here with me. We got Kingdom Soldier, and as I mentioned, we have LandO on, CDL caster, news and analysis, content creator, just overall BA amazing. You even put on the ROKKR hoodie, so I respect it.
I did.
I love that.
It's snowing in Texas for the first time, so I had to bring it out.
There you go. You had to get like Minnesota for a second. So obviously we have a ton to talk about this week. Holy cow. The biggest, it feels like we've been watching COD nonstop for the last week and a half, and maybe that's because we had Super Week going down CDL because of the aforementioned snowstorm that Landon just spoke of. You know, it kind of knocked power and just livability out for a lot of the players down in Dallas, Texas. I'd say most of the pro players in the CDL live down in Texas, so that led to us having this huge Super Week, a bunch of amazing matchups. And now we have our very first major coming up next week. So, boys, I want to just talk about what the hell is about to happen, because there were some like unpredictable things that did happen during the first stage and during the Super Week. I want all of your guys, let's go in rotation form around the horn here and just kind of give me your guys' takes on Super Week and how, like, what you're really looking forward to for the first major. Let's start with you, IKON.
Yeah, so I thought Super Week was a huge success. I love the fact that I could just sit back every day, watch a few Call of Duty matches, and it was like that for the entire week. I know that normally the schedule, Thursday through Sunday, sometimes you watch 2 matches and it seems like it's over, and we wish we had a little bit more Call of Duty, but the 3 matches on basically the last 3 or 4 days seemed like we had a ton of content to watch, and there were some crazy storylines. I think biggest storylines, and it was kind of cool because going into the major, the storylines for me were all about seeding, like who's going to get those top 3 seeds, who's going to end up in that winner's bracket to start Major 1. So that was something that was just developing the entire weekend, and there were some surprises. That was kind of the big thing for me. Is I just kind of figured that it was going to be Dallas, LA Thieves, and Minnesota in Group A, and we all know that New York just kind of came out of nowhere, ended up pushing Dallas to that map 5, ended up winning the 2 matches before that and the one after, ended up going 3-2. And because they beat Minnesota, they got that 3rd seed in that group. So a little bit unfortunate there based off of, who we were rooting for and doing the co-stream and whatnot. And then the other storyline in the other group is I kind of figured it would be this. Now, going into Super Week, the storyline would have been Atlanta, Optic, and then who's going to get that 3rd? Is it going to be Toronto? Is it going to be Florida? And it ended up being neither of them. And those were the teams that I thought maybe even one of those teams could get a 2 seed over Optic, and they just didn't show up the way that I expected. So LAG ended up coming through and sneaking into the winner's bracket, and now in terms of like my power rankings, I don't even know really where to start, because Florida and Toronto, I just figured, okay, they're 2 of the top 5 maybe. I think actually 2 weeks ago I had Florida as my 4th best team, and that was like right after they came off that victory over at Atlanta in the Kickoff Classic, and now I have them as like 9 or 10. So that's another big storyline. But for me, it was just, how are these teams performing throughout the course of the week, and how are they going to end up going into the first major in terms of seeding? And I thought in both groups, there were some crazy storylines that I didn't necessarily anticipate.
Yeah, absolutely. I love to hear the analysis there. There was definitely some tide turning I guess moments or matchups that, we do say all the time, like, man, it's so competitive, all these teams are so good, but you do kind of have those predictability factors that go into each matchup. You're like, oh yeah, I bet, Florida will probably take this, and then it all comes down to the day and how people play. So, LandO, would love your take. Obviously, you casted a ton of the action. I swear you were on there every day. There's a ton of work that you put in, which was awesome. I think you and Study, they're a great duo. I love watching you guys cast. What was kind of like your, like, I guess, take, since you're so involved in the matches and just watching and absorbing all of them? What was your like biggest surprise and favorite part of Super Week, and what are you thinking going into next week?
I mean, honestly, like so essentially, I was kind of one of the first people to. Well, okay, I'll say that. Let me kind of rephrase everything. So obviously, all of this kind of occurred with the Dallas storms, which totally kind of caught me off guard. Right, I was not expecting to have snow in Texas, let alone like 6 inches of snow outside my door. So that was obviously a little bit crazy. And then I was like, well, I'm not gonna be able to cast, so this is gonna be kind of rough because I don't have any power. So we were having like a few rehearsals and stuff, and I wasn't able to show up. And then I got the call saying, hey, obviously we have a lot of players in Dallas, so we're going to have to, move everything. And then they brought up the idea of Super Week, and I was like, oh, okay, this is kind of cool. This is, a little bit different. I know from everybody's perspective, matches. And I know from the production side, it was not an easy undertaking by any means. It's basically like doubling their workload and saying, hey, can we do this? And then they just kind of jumped right in. So obviously from a caster perspective, just from a talent perspective, it was great. It was really fun to be a part of. It was definitely a marathon for sure, but it was a great marathon. It wasn't just, boring things going on. There was always action, always fun moments. And I got the opportunity to hop on the desk a little bit, obviously commentate the games, do some interviews. So that was good. And I know that Lottie was having some tech problems. So there was a few more roles that we had to kind of fill in, and thankfully I think those are sorted because we desperately missed her a lot. So yeah, it was great. Really, really good time. And not to be I don't know, cookie cutter with this one, but favorite part of Super Week was probably honestly just like the feeling of all these games going on at once. It kind of felt like a classic. I know that we're not on land, but it kind of felt like a classic tournament where you're just like, from sunrise to sunset, like you're just grinding out games. I think the players kind of felt that too. And obviously the CDL is excellent. The franchising, the whole thing behind it is excellent. But, you do kind of miss a few of those things from time to time where it's just like, hey, this match starts at this time, this match starts at this time. And it kind of felt like we were in some ways back to that with the amount of games that we had going on. So, but yeah, excited for that. And I'm now even more excited for the major because it has caught me off guard. I think it's caught pretty much even the teams off guard to be like, hey, we got Super Week. By the way, next week is the major. So if you're not ready after this week, you're going to be in a pretty rough spot. So I'm just excited. Again, Super Week was great. And I will say, I don't necessarily hope that we have it again because of the marathon that it was, but I'm never going to get mad at having a lot of Call of Duty in a short span of time. So it was good.
More Call of Duty is always good. I definitely agree there. It's kind of weird. I mean, even this year's schedule in general is far more aggressive than last year's. Last year you'd have a week or two between the events, and if you were a team that didn't play it, one of them, you kind of had like 3 to 4 weeks in between. Now it's like go. I'm frankly a little surprised there's no break even in between the Super Week and the major. Like, even by design, before the snowstorm, there's no, like, typically there's a break before majors for esports. So Kingdom, I would love to know your thoughts. If you want, you can go into some of the matches or some of the key like surprises or just things that you thought were super awesome about Super Week. And then, want to kind of just get like your first take at first glance, I guess, at the major. And then we can kind of get into discussing some of the key matchups for Super Week, and then obviously looking ahead. So Kingdom, what do you think? We got you muted, bud. Can you guys hear him?
Can you hear me now?
Amateur
Hey,
hour, I
let's
tell you.
go.
Amateur hour.
So I was saying that I'm lagging a little bit. Can you guys hear me though?
You're
I
good.
hear you. I'm lagging too, bro.
Awesome.
It's a struggle today.
Word. It is. The struggle is real today.
I'm
Which
on
I
my
think,
phone's internet.
but we'll get the show done. So I thought that
Yeah.
this week was amazing. Like I will tell you that I've watched Call of Duty for 10 years. I fell in love with Call of Duty when Nadeshot was still playing, when Scump was going off with the Scorpion, and we were just meeting Clayster and Crimsix and Aches in a big way. They had already been playing, but like there's so many storylines that we saw yesterday the timeline. We don't even need to talk about it. It's just bananas, to end Super Week and
No,
going
we
into
have
this
to,
major.
bro. I'm so excited for that first
Yeah,
LA Thieves Dallas
was
matchup.
bananas.
It's gonna be insane. It's gonna be insane. But anyway, sorry, I'm
it's-
very excited.
No, all of the matchups are going to be insane. I looked at the bracket that IKON was putting together on his show today, and I was like, how the heck am I supposed to predict any of this? It's like if the NBA did a playoffs every month and you had to pick between all of the teams. Like it's what COD offers us is absolutely bananas. It's amazing. TJ had his 12-0 perfect search and destroy.
That was nuts.
Methods 1v4 to finish off the 6-0 versus Paris. Dallas with the first reverse sweep we've seen in the CDL versus a New York that, if I'm honest with you guys, I already had a tweet prepared that was going to be like, Clayster, the GOAT, 9-0, sends Dallas to the losers bracket. I didn't even get to tweet it because Dallas was like, shh. They gave Clayster his own meme right back in his face. Like it was bananas. And then that last match with the Thieves versus Dallas that was for all the marbles. It was so important, with Dallas coming out and just silencing all of their haters and saying, yeah, we lost our first match, but we're still the Dallas Empire. We are the defending champions. Don't forget it, And going into this major, I bet people that would have predicted them to finish top 4 or even top 5 or 6 like 3 weeks ago would now say, for sure, you can't count Dallas out of this tournament. Most people have them in the grand final. And so I just thought it was amazing. I think Silly dropped like 20-4 in a search and destroy versus Toronto over both of the searches. And of course, Toronto really, F's in the chat for them. That was rough. They put themselves all the way down by losing that match. And then I thought one of the cooler elements of this week for me was the ROKKR doing their news conference. I don't remember if it was yesterday or 2 days ago. I think it was yesterday.
It was yesterday.
Yeah, that was just awesome. Like to have, I wanted to get on there and call in, like to have like news outlets, and I think I heard somebody that was like from Fox or something, esports, and like to have these people call in and be able to ask questions of the players and the coach and the team. I thought that was really cool. And what I heard out of that from like Lamar from Accuracy, he was like, we still had a winning record. We got 2 3-0s out of our last 3 matches. Like, we're going into this positive. We didn't win the head-to-head, so we got bumped to losers bracket. And the LB run in this league is going to be very difficult because somebody from the top, whether it's Optic or Dallas or Faze or LAT or New York, is going to be in the losers bracket. You're going to have at least half of those teams in the losers bracket trying to make a similar run. And so all these teams are going to be preparing like crazy. And that's kind of what Brian Saint said at the end of it. He's like, we're just going to prepare to be our best, because we get a bye on the first day. And then when we find out who we're going to play, we're going to have some time, like 24 hours to prepare for it. So I thought this was amazing. Whoever came up with this idea, bravo to you. The league has been ran so well this year. I'll be honest, LandO, I didn't even notice, and this isn't shade, that Lottie was like missing in some of it, because you guys just do like, every caster this year, every casting duo is phenomenal. Everybody's doing a great job. I'm very impressed, and this major is going to be off the charts.
I'm ecstatic. I did notice Lottie was not there, but I also did notice her mic messing up quite a bit, and then she just wasn't there, and I was like, dang, she got hit with it. And now, we're no stranger, especially me over here, to technical difficulties, so you do what you can. I'm glad to hear she'll be back, though. She has the sickest leather jacket of anyone I've ever seen, by the way. Shout out Lottie and her jacket. I thought that, Super Week was really awesome. Obviously, as a, I don't know, how do I even say this? I'm not a diehard ROKKR fan. I'm a diehard ROKKR person.
You
Like,
are a
that's just
fan
who
though
I
too.
am.
Yeah.
I
You
am
still,
a fan.
yeah.
Yes, I'm fan number one, technically. Like, literally, the day one fan, who now just
Yep.
happens to work here. But it was disappointing to finish 3-2 and still end up in the losers bracket, but it's a testament to how competitive this league is. Obviously, New York was really hot, and Asim just, man, that is a way to play against a team that didn't, extend your contract or extend your +1. I'm really happy for him. He's really kind of developed into a really strong player. It's kind of been interesting too. Like, maybe I guess let's just do a quick take, like, discussion on this quick. How does a team go from being the route man, the rotator, the entry sub, to just fly in there and try to distract and help have his teammates get the trade in 5v5 last year in Modern Warfare, and even all the way back to Black Ops 4, to now? I mean, what the heck, bro? He was like 22-5, like 79-0 in search. It's like he's playing a different role. Like, what's your guys' kind of take on that? Is it the Clayster effect? Is it just him not being restrained to a role? I'd love to hear you guys. Let's rotate around. IKON, we'll let you go first.
Yeah, I do think that part of it is the Clayster effect. I mean, he had that effect on MiDNiTE when he had Simp and Abizi. Now, it's Simp and Abizi, and they're going to be great no matter what, but he did have that effect initially. And then last year with Shotzi and Illy, kind of the same sort of thing. Although last year they started off kind of slow. They came out of the gates. They got smoked by Chicago in that opening launch weekend, and kind of took them a little while to get going. But eventually, by that LA home series, they were able to find their pace. But when it comes to Asim, a lot of what he's doing is he's not playing totally different. I mean, he's still playing super fast. He's still kind of being that entry man. He's still one of the first one into, inside the hard points, or trying to break hard points if they don't have initial spawns. One of the biggest difference is that we're playing 4v4. So when he's entering into these hills, and if he gets a two-piece, there aren't two more people in those hills to try to trade him out, because you have an AR and a flex trying to hold down, routes and rotations and stuff like that. So when he's being aggressive and when he's getting big kills, those two pieces on rotations and entries into hills, those mean things this year. Because if you get a two piece and you're trying to break a hill, now all of a sudden you have hill control and you have one side of the map locked down. So to me, it really is just the simple fact that there are less people on the map. Whereas if he would have done that last year, sure, he gets in, gets a kill. But if he gets traded, there's still 4 other enemies inside or around that hill. And it's just not as consequential as it was. So that's really the biggest thing for me is, and the last thing that I'll mention is I think he has a ton of confidence this year too. A couple times I've heard him say that he owes so much to Zuma, and he thanks him so much just for having kind of faith in him and bringing him in and making him believe that he's that guy. So I think it's a perfect storm. I mean, even last year, he made some huge plays. He was a big part of why Minnesota started the year so hot. And I think that he just has his confidence. He's got Clay behind him, just hyping him up, telling him that, he can slay with anybody. And now when he gets those kills, they mean a lot. And he's winning rotations, winning hill time. And it all it's coming to fruition here for New York. And that's exactly what they needed with all the other stuff that they've dealt with Hydra and Zuma.
I definitely agree there. I just wish it didn't have to happen against ROKKR. It was brutal. Right. It was, I don't even remember the maps anymore. I've repressed it all. Landon, what was the most, surprising part to you about Asim's performance? And was there another player that you were taken by surprise during Super Week? Like, who do you think really elevated their team last week?
Yeah, I mean, to kind of touch on Asim quick, I mean, I think just in terms of his level of play, I think, some of it does have to do with the Clayster effect. I know, and again, I think, IKON covered it really well. It's like, whenever Clay has, these fast SMGs around him, they tend to see success. And I think it's just because of the communication that's given to them as well. Sometimes you see fast players, kind of get exploited from time to time. And I think a majority of it is because there's just not this small talk. There's not this kind of back and forth. So, when you're playing at such a fast pace, sometimes you're trying to collect, like, where am I? Where did I just spawn these guys out? Like, your major focus is not always like, on the in-depth portions of the game. And so I think whenever you do have somebody like Clay, it kind of gives you a good bird's eye view for like, hey, what's coming up, what just happened, and what's coming up next. So I think that really helps. I think Asim, okay, so hold on really quick. I gotta say, I did an interview with him. I asked him before. I said, I know your name's Asim. What do you want me to call you? He said, honestly, dude, just call me Asim. All the casters don't know how to say it. Call me Asim. So I'm going to bounce back and forth. Just wanted to make that clear. If I do say Asim, he gave me the right to say
in his intro interview when we did content with him last year, I was like, so how do I say it? Is it Asim or Asim? And he said, whatever you want. I was like, no, really though, like we're trying to get it
You
right.
have a
He's
name,
like,
right?
it really doesn't matter. I'm like,
exactly.
Okay.
It's like
I'm pretty sure
like Envoy, Envoy,
name. Yeah, well, it's Envoy for sure, but
yeah, right. I think eventually we'll get to the point where Asim will let us know one or the other, but we'll see what it is. But just quick, in closing on him, I think too, in regards to like 5v5, 4v4, I think it's just easier to like not necessarily make plays, but I think a lot of teams are still getting used to the lack of a player on your team and the lack of a player on another team. And that's where comms, again, really comes into play. And I think having someone like Clay, having good communication on this team, Max known as a great communicator, DiamondCon, one of his biggest strengths is being a great communicator, being good at small talk, despite being in his rookie season. So I think he just has a really good awareness for where to go. And I think, again, in 4v4, there's a lot of teams where their comms just aren't on point. I mean, there's been a number of different times where we've gone to, these Astro listen-ins, and you're just like, there's a major dip here. Like, that fifth player really like kind of elevated things, or, you're just hearing like, hey, guys over here, or I just died over here. It's like, that doesn't help anything. So, I mean, it kind of goes a few different ways, but I think he's just able to make plays now. I think, again, and I know IKON touched on it, but like, the difference from 5v5 to 4v4 is so insane. It's actually unreal. Just because of the amount of trading last year, you dive in and you're the first one to drop. Well, now on your stats, it looks like you're 0-1, but in reality, you set up a play that maybe broke a hard point. So I think it's just a number of different ways, but I think primarily, he's hungry. He's playing for a spot potentially. I mean, well, I don't know what's going on with Hydra's with his visa right now. I think he's motivated. I think DiamondCon's motivated. I think this entire team just has something to just kind of have a vendetta, right? DiamondCon wants to prove that he's, deserves of a spot. Same thing with Asim. Same thing with Clay. Clay says he has a huge chip on his shoulder for obvious reasons. And obviously, when we talk about ROKKR, Asim and stuff, there's just a number of different connections that I think are making this team really hungry. And I was really impressed with him. In terms of a standout player, I mean, there are a few. I got to say, though, like, as someone who has watched Hook throughout his entire career, I mean, the guy is just unbelievable this season. Like, I'm very hesitant to, because there's always like a time, right, where it's like, oh my gosh, Hook looks like the best player in the game. Like, right now is, I think, the best Call of Duty he has ever played. And I say that super carefully because, again, in AW, people forget how insane he was with Carnage, even like back in the early days. And when he's on Stunner, when he's on Faze, Denial, all those teams, Hook is playing his best COD without a doubt, and he's doing it in the most competitive atmosphere we have ever seen. And so I got to say, for me, standout, I mean, there's a number of different guys that you could list off, but just every time for Empire, there were so many different series for them that were important. The comeback versus, NYSL, the series where they, close out the Thieves, the crazy Game 5 versus London that no one expected. A number of different series, and he was always there for them. He was always making plays. So for me, at least, one of many standouts, but I think one of my biggest ones for sure is just the level that Hook's playing for Empire right now.
He's playing absolutely insane. Kingdom, would love to know your thoughts. I know we've definitely discussed Asim at length, so if you have thoughts there, I want to hear those, but would also just want to hear kind of your thoughts, generally when you look at these teams, how everything kind of shook out over Super Week, and what teams do you think kind of like, I mean, maybe I'm biased in even bringing this up, but maybe like didn't get the full squeeze of the juice out of Super Week, but now they might be primed for a majors run, maybe a certain team from the north that's in the lower bracket. But no, yeah, just really want to hear like your thoughts. You know, if you have standout players or thoughts, and then you know
Yeah.
going into next week, like what's the unexpected from your angle?
Okay, so I've said this all year. I'm gonna keep saying it until, because the guy deserves the gas. James Eubanks, like Clayster, I don't have enough fingers and toes to name the number of players that started when he started that are retired and that have won championships.
Yeah,
Some of them are casting, some of them are creating content, some of them are Warzone players, like some of them are in challengers. But this dude is playing. I mean, where are these stats? I have these stats somewhere. I think this guy's leading in uh, multiple stats right now. He's second behind Hook, which who would have predicted that? It's him, Hook, Simp, and Dashy. Who would have put Clayster with those three players for
wow.
top overall kill death ratio? He's number 3 in S&D KD right now. And in control, he's number 1 with a 1.43. And he has 2 more kills per 10 minutes than Cammy, who's in second. Like, Clayster is absolutely playing out of his
He's
mind.
balling.
He is, and I'm going to say it, I know that he had a moment where the storylines, Clayster is the person that I think it was 2 years ago, he said in a quote that the storylines in COD, what makes them is roster changes. And there are roster changes that if they never happened, it would change the entire landscape of Call of Duty even to this very day. Like, if you think about if the Karma and Formal and Crim6 and, you know, like if that team wouldn't have joined with Nadeshot and if that wouldn't have happened, you know, like there's so many different trades that have happened that have changed the landscape of Call of Duty. No one has made more of a roster change in the last, I'd say, I don't know, 3 years than Clayster. Like, getting dropped after championships and then winning another. Like, I don't think anybody saw that coming. This dude goes thousands of days without a championship, and then it's like, no, I'm not just going to win now. I'm going to keep winning. He's one of only 2 players that's won over $1 million. Like, the guy is just out of his mind right now. And I think that you have to give some of Asim or Asim, you have to give some of what he's doing. You have to give some credit to Clay. He said in his last interview, like, that he yells at them. Like, he just, you know, he basically was like, somehow it works. Like, I'm yelling at them and it works. And this is what people criticized Crim6 for years. Like, they didn't want to get yelled at. They made fun of him. They made memes. They made jokes. They got on other teams, like last year, the LA Optic guys, and talked about it, you know, and it's like everybody kind of talks about how Crim yells all the time and nobody wants to be on a team with Crim yelling, and Clayster is yelling at his players and it's working. You know, like, he is the standout,
Imagine
obvious leader
Crim
of that team.
and Clay. Hook
Oh
was
my
really,
gosh.
they were dealing with Crim, and imagine both of them yelling at you. Maybe
But
they had to
but
split them apart.
but here's the deal. Crim and Clay yelling is probably what challenged the beginning of last season. But once they kind of said, all right, you are the only one that yells and you give gas. And then when I'm yelling in this game mode, you give gas. I thought that the Atlanta Faze, I was wrong, might struggle, and maybe they will later in the season, without having that kind of gas from Clayster. But with all those players playing with him, I would think that's part of Arcity's leadership role. Somebody on that team is just gassing up the other players, and like when they're getting 2 pieces, they're yelling it like, you know, great 2-piece. But I would say standout, hands down. Not even, I don't think any you could. There's just nobody else that's playing at his level that is at his point in the game right now. He has shown that he's a better individual player than Crim6. However, the reverse sweep says Crim still got the ice. He's still the GOAT. Like, that reverse sweep was where, that's where it shows what Crim6 has done over his career. That's why you kept him on the team, is for those moments. Because having that first seed and getting that bye for like 2 days before you even play is going to make a huge difference. New York would have sent them to the losers bracket if they would have been able to close out that series. And no amount of yelling is going to produce the ice that Crim and those guys have playing together for 2 years, winning a championship together, sitting on a throne whenever they want to, just for fun, to remind themselves how good they are. So I think that Clay is definitely my key standout. Where things have landed real quick, I'll mention, in terms of like how the bracket was produced from Super Week. I think Lag is in a tough spot. I think head-to-head is what got them into round one. But facing the Thieves, and even if you get a W there somehow, you got to face Atlanta in the second round. Like, I don't even want to say, like, if I'm them, I'm getting ready for a loser's bracket run. But they do get to lose a match. So, you know, big props to them for that last for the W that they got that got them into winners round one. That whole top half of the bracket is just scary. And if you're, and I think IKON mentioned this on his channel, if you're Florida and Toronto, so somebody said live, I don't know if it was Landon, I don't know who it was, they said live, one of the casters, that round one of the elimination bracket, of the losers bracket, or elimination bracket, I guess we're not trying to call them losers, but, you know, we've this is what Call of Duty does.
Lower. We call it,
they're in the
we'll
losers
just call it
bracket.
lower. They're just the lower bracket.
We don't have to call
when
them
Rocker's
losers.
down there, it's the lower bracket. When Rocker's
the lower
not
bracket,
in there,
there
it's
you
the
go.
losers bracket. Yeah.
Yeah, right. The lower bracket, round one, somebody said that's roster change round. Like, whatever teams catch an L, especially if Florida and the Ultra catch losses in round one of the elimination bracket, lower bracket, whatever you want to call it, yeah, that's rough. You are well below expectations that you had for yourself and that everybody else in the league had for you. If the Ultra would have clutched up in that last game and, you know, didn't let Silly, you know, do what he did against them and, you know, get 20 kills in 2 search games and only 4 deaths, like, maybe they're better off. But unfortunately, they couldn't be what they were supposedly, which is a great search team, to get themselves in, you know, in a better position. And so for Florida and the Ultra, must win. Have to win. It's a requirement. For the ROKKR, in my opinion, have to win in that round 2. Probably I mean, of course, you want to win out, but for the ROKKR, I would, you know, you have to go at least a few rounds in that lower bracket and face up against some of those teams that you should be playing with in the upper bracket in order to feel like you've had some success in this tournament. Of course, everybody wants to win. All of these teams want to win the tournament, but they can't. That's not possible. By the third day, there's going to be, 5-6 teams knocked out. So if I'm Florida, the Toronto Ultra, and the Minnesota ROKKR, I need to face off against an Optic, a Dallas, a Faze, or an LA Thieves before I get knocked out of this tournament. And so I think that's what's shaken up. The ROKKR did have a winning record, but unfortunately the head-to-head just didn't work in their favor. And so, and I guess the final thing I'll say, which I've already mentioned and we've already mentioned, is, of course, the Dallas Empire clutching up against the LA Thieves was the most important match on that docket going into it. We knew it would have implications. You're either first place or you're third place, and they would have put the subliners into second. I mean, you're changing the whole bracket. So
ROKKR would have been
that's
in the
my thoughts.
spot if New York would have won. ROKKR would have been in there, right?
Yeah, right. Yep.
Like, they started
Empire would have wound
the
up in the lower bracket.
The ROKKR really started playing the skirt song because they thought it was over. I thought it was over. Everyone thought it was over. I couldn't believe it. And then, you know, obviously you had Surge really playing for nothing against New York. There was definitely opportunity for ROKKR to control their fate there, right? Obviously,
yeah.
You know, we have a winning record, but when you get 3-0'd and you're going to lose the tiebreak then, and that's a tough scene. But I think, you know, you made some really good points there about the bracket and what these implications and what these games really mean. I mean, yeah, it is only, you know, it's the first major, it's the first stage. Like, we're getting our feet wet with the entire CDL 2021 season right now, so we're getting in our groove a little bit. This is by no means champs, but you do kind of have that sense of urgency. When I thought ROKKR looked pretty good a majority of the time. You know, there was some stinkers there, especially in Surge, or not in Surge, in Hardpoint. But I think it's very bounce backable. They're going to be my comeback team for next week, that's for sure. I have a noob question, and it's okay if none of you guys know this right now because I should probably know it. But who do ROKKR play the loser of from the upper bracket? Do we know? Is it LAG? Because if that's the case, life ain't all that bad, maybe.
I think they play. No, I think they play the.
Oh, I see. Yo, we got graphics?
Wouldn't they play the winner of the Ultra and the Ravens?
No.
So somebody drops
so.
down first?
Yes, I think so.
Because
don't quote me on
where
that.
does that eliminate?
I don't know.
The eliminated team can't skip to round 3, so they have to go to round 2. So I would think they play the winner of the Ultra and the Ravens, right?
Yes, they do.
IKON?
Yes. Yep.
Shout out to you guys for knowing, because I didn't know. So Ultra or Ravens, basically the winner of that match is who ROKKR will play.
Yep.
Yeah,
could be a second Battle of the North.
Battle of the North that early.
Yep, that actually makes me really nervous, because I was gonna say, like, I think Toronto is better than how they played. I also think ROKKR is better than how they played, but Toronto had some. I mean, those were fights, dude. Really close maps, insane matches. They underperformed my expectations for them, and I think a lot of others. But I still think like they have the right ingredients to bake the cake. They just overheated the oven. I'm sorry. I don't know what another cool kind of joke. So since we're talking about like the bracket and the matchups, should we just roll right into predictions? Predictions usually take us a good chunk of time, and now we have an extra person. So we're gonna be putting you on the spot, LandO. We're gonna be going for like, who do you think's gonna win? Who's gonna win against who? If producer Shannon, shout out Shannon for getting these graphics and everything ready, if you're able to put that on the screen again, and we can kind of make some guesstimations here. I am on my phone, so I can't really see. Oh, there we go. All right. Speaking of being on my phone, I have to plug it in while one of you guys are talking. That's how we're doing it tonight. It's rough over here. But all right, so if we're looking at the losers match 1, we've got Surge versus MiDNiTE. My God, I don't even know, because like I think Surge looked better each day. Is that safe to say? They got a little better each time I saw them, it felt like. And then MiDNiTE is, I mean, they should be performing, but they're not. So maybe they will, or maybe they won't. I don't know. It's too hard to say. So would love to kind of rotate around, go through the predictions here for match number 1, Surge versus MiDNiTE. IKON, you can take it first. We're kind of going in order, and I'm gonna plug my phone in. I'll be right back. What do you predict?
I won't take a ton of time with this. I think these are 2 teams that have major question marks for me. I mentioned in the intro that I really thought Florida was the 4th best team. At that point in time, it was like Florida or Toronto or New York or LA Thieves, or we were trying to figure out like who was going to be after those top 3 teams. And I thought that Florida had the potential to be there. And they've just kind of fallen off completely over the last week or so. But when I look at that roster, I just feel like there's so much talent, like with Skies, and Awakening is always super solid, and Neptune has made some unbelievably plays so far. I think the biggest question mark is, what are you going to get in a match-in, match-out basis from Slacked? But on the flip side of that, when it comes to Seattle, I think Gunless has been playing as their best player. I think Gunless has been phenomenal. I'm waiting for Octane to, not that he's been playing bad, but he hasn't been the Octane that we've seen last year. I just don't know if they can get the production from their SMGs that you could potentially get out of Neptune on the other side. So when I look at that matchup, I just think that Florida, I don't know why. They can lose over and over and over again. They can underperform. They can look terrible. And whenever I think of them, I'm like, this has to be a match that Florida wins because they're so talented. Skies was an MVP candidate last year. Like, it just, to me, it seems like they're so talented. And when I look at that matchup, I'm not sure you can get the SMG production out of Seattle. So I'm going to go Florida there. It'll probably be a struggle because they haven't looked great. It wouldn't surprise me if it goes map 5. So I'll say they'll clutch up in the search. I'll say Florida 3-2. LandO, what do you think?
I mean, I am pretty much with you on everything that you said. I feel like with Seattle, I mean, there was a lot of people who thought that they were going to be better than this. I mean, you could argue, you could say that about a number of different teams. Like, oh, you should say that about Surge. You can say that about Florida. You can say that about, insert team here, really, Toronto. And I really just haven't been as impressed with Surge as I thought. Like, I was pretty, in terms of predictions, in terms of like where I had Surge last season, I feel like I was all over them. Like, I feel like I just knew exactly like the way that they were going to perform based on the players that they had. I didn't predict them to really be a great team last season, despite where like a lot of people had. And I'm wrong this year. Like, I thought that we were going to see a better, and it's stage 1, obviously, but still, these matches come out quick. You know how esports works. We all know how Call of Duty works. I mean, you don't play well in the first few matches, first few weeks. players' mindsets, they instantly start to drift and they're like, maybe we should make a change, just, however it works. But I don't know. I think that I am going to lean Florida here. And I think that it's for them, it really is just minor things. I don't think that it's anything like unbelievable that you have to work on. And same thing with Surge to a point, but I think for the same reason that IKON mentioned, I think the SMGs for me are always going to be a worry. I think that Looney is a great player. I think that he has a huge role on this team. The problem, I feel like, is just the duo of the SMG line. Like, Pristini, don't get me wrong, Pristini is an unbelievable player. And when Pristini is on, I mean, at times in Black Ops 4 Champs, he was the reason, and I think it was in that 100 Thieves series, that they like made it as far as they did. Like, he could be the guy, even in a Champs Grand Final. But there are just moments where it just doesn't pan out. It just doesn't work. The consistency isn't there. And he is probably one of the most hot and cold players that I've seen in a very long time. And so when you have that in combination with Looney, who is a great player, but he's not going to be an Abizi, for example, you have a lot of really good SMG lines. And I think with Florida, you have a lot of players who are improving. You have a lot of guys who are starting to step up to the plate. Same thing last year with Shotzi. It took a while, right? It took a while for him to kind of get up to speed. It took him a little while to kind of figure out his role. You saw guys like Hook kind of step out of the way to try to make sure that he could be more comfortable. He ends up becoming the MVP. I'm not saying that's going to be the same thing that we see with Neptune, but I like his progression. I think he's starting to get a better feel for the game as time goes on, and I think I just trust that team more. And if we're talking, and much like IKON said, if we're talking about an MVP candidate having a slow start to the season in Skies, I'm intending on him being back to form, and I think that they are going to figure things out. I know Search and Destroy has been a big one for them. Constantly, everybody's talking about Search and Destroy. Awakening's finding the first blood, but we're not finishing things out. It's like you're doing the hard thing first. It's just a matter of the things that come along with it that should be there. So I think, I trust the coaching staff there. I trust that team. I trust Ricky Atura. I trust the team that they have, and I think that they walk away with the game. I don't think it's going to be an easy one. I could easily see a 3-2. Maybe a close 3-1. It's hard, obviously, without knowing map vetoes and stuff like that. But I don't know. I just think that it really will kind of come down to the SMGs for the most part, depending on the maps that we see. And right now, I trust Florida, given the minor little things that I think that overall look like they're bigger than they actually are.
I will, for the sake of time, I'll be quick on this one. I think Florida will take it. I think they will, to tell a dad joke, they will wake up. I think Awakening has been phenomenal, and if I'm him, this is one of those things like happens in the NBA, like a player just keeps shining, keeps doing great, and everybody's paying attention to that one player, and the rest of the team just isn't keeping up. And the things he's been doing in Search are absolutely ridiculous. I think he's the only person in the league who's averaging a kill per Search and Destroy round. And so I think Florida's going to take it. I think the Surge, they're the Seattle team. I keep wanting to hope for them, but Seattle teams can do this. It's in the water up here, I guess. Like they comprise something good that looks like it has so much potential, and then just kind of doesn't rise to the occasion. Seattle has so much potential, but this is a team like IKON, when you talked about the New York Subliners might later in the season be great, I think Seattle has to take some more time to be great. And if ROKKR is the team that probably has the potential to go the farthest in that lower bracket, I think Florida's the scariest, because they are a team that can just randomly beat you when you don't expect it. So I'm expecting Florida to take that 3-1.
Okay. Yeah, I think we're all probably pretty much on board with Florida. That's just a team that they've got to figure it out sooner or later. I think by the second major, maybe the third major, I think they'll probably be in that 4th, 5th spot, somewhere in there where we expect them to be. But for now, they've got some things to iron out, as many of these squads do. Let's go into that second match in the elimination round one. We have Toronto versus London. This one for me, even though I have basically no faith in Toronto at all, I couldn't believe the stretch that they went on. They came out, they beat Florida, and I thought that's a huge win. Toronto could potentially end up getting into that winner's bracket. They could even maybe steal the 2 seed from Optic. Then they lost to Faze, got smoked by Optic, lost to Paris, lost to LAG, and they just kind of went on this downward spiral. But in what might even be a worse scenario than them, London is 0-5. They did, and it's shocking too, because I thought there might have been a turning point there when they played Dallas and they took them to that map 5. And after that, I thought, okay, Parasite's here. Maybe they're gelling a little bit. They're building some team morale and chemistry, and it just didn't come through. So I think when I'm comparing these two teams, I think Shawnee is fantastic. I think Shawnee is one of the better ARs in the league this year, but I don't see much out of their SMGs. Parasite is new. They probably don't have a ton in terms of chemistry and what they're trying to achieve on the map. Whereas when I look at Ultra, yeah, I mean, that's a big question too. Is it Shawnee? I mean, they gave him the keys to the castle, so that's probably who I would look to. But I don't know. That is a big question mark. But when I look at Ultra on the other side, this is a team that's been together for a while. You have two of the more electric players in Cammy and Kleenex, and even though they really haven't been performing, especially during Super Week, it's a very similar scene to Florida. You just kind of figure that they're going to get it worked out. And maybe I'm wrong. I mean, maybe we come back at Major 3 and both of these teams are in complete disarray and we've had roster changes and they weren't who we expect them to be. But whenever I think of Toronto, I think back to the Toronto home series and the plays that they made to end up winning that home series over Atlanta. And they were just phenomenal. And I think that they still have the potential to do that. And we saw that a little bit early, even though they did, like, even since kickoff weekend, when they lost that opening matchup, the battle for the North against Minnesota, they still looked really good in that matchup. And then they came out and they beat Florida, but now that win doesn't look so good. But in this one, I don't really see a path to victory for London in this matchup. So I'm going to go Toronto here. I mean, it wouldn't shock me if it's a 3-0, but I'll say a 3-1 just to give maybe the search to London. But I'll go 3-1 here to Toronto. LandO?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's really unfortunate to kind of see where both of these teams are at. I think primarily for London, it sucks because you're just waiting for 0, I'm assuming. And then I think a few days ago, he's basically kind of playing in Challengers. So I don't know if that's like a timetable estimate for what we should think is like, don't know, or it's like it's going to be longer than we thought. So I don't know. I think for London, it's kind of like, I think the morale is just down. I think for them, not having the full roster, it makes you kind of frustrated. And then you're like, guys, we haven't even won a search and destroy yet. Like, something is clearly off. And not to provide a spoiler, I would be casting this game, so I've done a lot of research into it. And one thing that I looked at last year was that for London, the 2 search and destroy KD leaders for them were the Twins, and the Twins are no longer here. They were the ones making the plays. I forget the map. I want to say it was I forget the map. But regardless, there was like this one map that I remember London was especially good on, and it was all because of the plays that Scraps would set up. Yes, Piccadilly. Thank you. It'd be like because of the Wiskin snipes, it'd be Dylan and Scraps working alongside each other. Gunrunner as well was a really good one for them. So I think for them, it's just morale is not there. I think they have a lot of pressure on their shoulders as well, given the fact that, again, the Twins aren't here, right? Scraps is performing really well with Paris, which is crazy to think about. And again, I just think when it comes down to this particular series, I'm not looking at the search and destroy. I'm not looking at the control. The mode that I'm looking out for is hardpoint, because when Toronto wins their game 1 hardpoint, they've won the game 4 hardpoint. And whenever Toronto does that, they tend to succeed. The one series that they won, they managed to win both hardpoints, and that was against the Florida Mutineers to start things off. So I trust them more. I think for me, the player to look out for in terms of Toronto, Methods has like a 1 KD across every mode. I have no idea how. He has a 1 KD in Hardpoint, a 1 KD in S&D, a 1 KD in Control. So you know what you're going to get in Methods. He's at least going to trade. Kleenex and the Hardpoints has been insane. And Cammy has been taking over in different moments. Control, I know especially has been with those. Bance is the guy that I'm looking out for. He, to me, is the X factor to kind of start things off, because, again, when Toronto starts off well, they tend to succeed. He has a 0.77 hardpoint KD whenever they lose, and he has a 1.16 whenever they win. In Toronto, whenever the whole team is playing well, whenever they're winning hardpoints, they're all like a 1.13 to 1.16. So it's like saying all that to basically say Toronto, whenever they play well, they start off hot. London, I think think they've gone down like 0-2 in like every series. Like they've gone down 0-2 in a majority of them, except for like I think the game 5 they had versus Dallas. So I don't know. I just, as much as I would love to have this London story because the way that they turned up at champs, and it's like, hey, you know, there's this big storyline, like maybe they could do it again. I just think that the morale's down, and I think the same way that you said, IKON, about this roster having been together before, they're coming into a new year, one of like, what, 2 teams that decided to actually keep the roster without like throwing one out. Sorry, Classic. I like them. I do. I like Toronto's chances. I like where they sit right now, and I trust Bance to kind of be that extra player for them to really turn up. And so I think they win the hard point. They might, or I'll say this, I think they win the hard point. I think that the S&D is going to go their way, and I think they might lose the control. They've not been good at control. London's been okay for some reason in control. So I think it's going to be a 3-1. I think Toronto takes both hard points in the S&D, but that's just kind of where I sit. And I don't know what's going to happen with London. I know they have Afro sitting on the bench, but again, visas, I have no idea what's going on with visas. So I don't know if like there's a chance that we see a roster change for them. Do they bring somebody in outside of Parasite? If things don't work, do they just kind of continue to ride it out? And if I don't know it, not saying that they don't know it either, but it wouldn't surprise me if they don't have a game plan for what's going on. So I think there's just a lot of pressure and a lot of situations that they are not aware of. And I think that works out in Ultra's favor in a number of different ways.
I'm going to say Ultra is going to take this 3-1, maybe 3-0. If I'm the London Royal Ravens, they already made the mistake of not signing the Twins, which they said they were going to. They missed out on that opportunity. Both of them are thriving where they're at. You know, Scratch is doing good in Paris. Weston's having fun playing Warzone, having great streams. They're great personalities. They brought a lot of fire to London. Even when losing, it was fun to watch them play. This team isn't fun to watch play when they're losing, you know. And Parasite's not raging. He's not getting on Twitter and, you know, being negative or anything like that. But maybe you want him to, you know, maybe like show us something. And I think Zero, from the rumors I heard weeks ago, it was like he didn't want to go through the protocols he needed to, the COVID protocols, in order to quarantine for long enough to where he could come to the States or something like that, or get his visa. I don't know how that all works, but at the end of the day, London has become what everybody thought Paris was going to be. Everybody's making fun of Paris. They're not tweeting. They don't have a roster. They haven't said anything on Twitter. What a horrible organization. But they're in round 2 of the lower bracket rather than round 1, and they've showed some life. London hasn't really showed us anything except for that first match, like you talked about, IKON. And so I just don't think London have any dog in their fight, so to speak. However, if I was coaching, if they have a coach at London, I would just say I would let somebody run with it and put them, just say either Parasite be in charge, or you can't be at Parasite's level as a veteran and not bring something else to the table other than just your abilities on the map. And you can't, and this team is playing more like individuals than the Legion are, you know, than Paris is. And I thought Paris was going to play like all by themselves because they'd never played together before. But London is just not really putting up a good fight against teams. And I think Ultra has a lot to prove. I think they're frustrated. I think they're great in search, and I think they'll show up and take a 3-1 or 3-0 victory over London.
Yeah, just to kind of touch on, you guys both mentioned this a little bit. I really, last year, you know, going into that London home series, I fell in love with the story of the Twins and London and their crowd. And that was the reason why I was excited to watch that team. And it just seemed like every tournament I wanted to see what the Twins were doing, and they're scrappy and they're just, you know, they get down and they do the dirty work and they pull out these maps. And it was just a great story watching London last year. And this year, I mean, nothing against those players. I think Shawnee is fantastic. They just for whatever reason don't seem to have the same draw for me as they did last year. And it kind of stinks. Yeah. I do wish that the Twins were there because it was such a great story, but it is what it is. Let's continue on here. Let's just do elimination round 2. Both those teams that we mentioned will be playing Florida versus Paris, and then Minnesota versus Toronto. So in elimination round 2, I'll just start here. I'll do both of them just to kind of get them out of the way, because I think honestly, I don't know how much of a game either of these will be. If I'm looking at the first one, Paris versus Florida, I think Paris is the surprise of the season so far for me. I know just when I did my power rankings after that opening weekend, I had Paris at 12th. I didn't know what to expect from them. Sure, they were full of good players that could come in clutch, and we saw what Classic did kind of in those preseason tournaments, and you never want to write off somebody like Scraps, and Fire's been playing super well, but I didn't expect this much out of them. So I think, again, as much as I want to believe in Florida, I think if I could just erase the last week, now all of a sudden I think this is going to be a super competitive game. But you can't overlook the fact that Paris just 3-0'd Florida during Super Week. They got a 3-2 victory over Toronto. I mean, they've been playing super well, and they almost beat Atlanta. They almost gave Atlanta their only loss in the first stage. So I think Paris is playing super hot. I think they probably win that one 3-1. Then Minnesota versus Toronto in the second game of the elimination round 2. This is one where we get to touch on Minnesota here for the first time. I'll tell you, it really reminds me of, and I don't want to say it's on the same level, but whenever I see like Tom Brady in a clutch situation, he just always pulls it out. So like if he's in the Super Bowl, I'm like, you guys can go ahead and talk about Patrick Mahomes or whoever you want, all you want. You know that Tom Brady is going to perform when it comes down to it. That's how I feel about Minnesota in a lot of these control and a lot of these search rounds. You have accuracy just coming out and getting 2 pieces to win rounds in that map 5 against Dallas, which was a massive matchup. Attach gets a 2-piece to win a round. He hits a flank in the middle of map on Garrison, hits a 2-piece to win a round. I just feel like, I believe it was MiDNiTE also did the same thing when he was sitting under top green. Those two in particular mix in accuracy. I just feel like they have this unique ability to clutch up. Priesta, he didn't have a great control round or a great control map in their final matchup against Seattle, and he hits a flank on raid through mid stairs, gets a 2-piece from behind. He clears out that B side on the top side of the map, and now they end up winning that map and getting a 3-0 over Seattle in a huge position. So I don't know. It just seems like at any given time, whether they're playing good or they're not, each of those players have the ability to step up in the clutch when they need to. So I think Legion's going to win. I think Minnesota's going to win. I could see them dropping, like you mentioned, LandO, I could see them coming out and not winning those hard points. I actually think Minnesota might be the worst team in the league, the 12th ranked team in the league when it comes to map record for hard point. So I could see that being a struggle to start that match, but then it goes to a search, which they're best at, and they also play control really well. So I'll say this one will go the distance, but I'm still going to go 3-2 Minnesota here.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty similar. Again, looking at the bracket and stuff. I mean, Seattle versus Florida. I personally think Florida comes away with it. Them versus Paris. I know we were kind of going off of some quarterback examples. I think Paris, dare I say, as a Browns fan, kind of the Baker Mayfield a little bit. Like, they're kind of surprising a little bit, but at the same time, like, do you trust them? Like, do you trust the Legion? I think that's where kind of my opinion lies right now. Is like, can I trust Paris? Like, can I trust this group of guys who, again, a lot of people didn't really know where to put them. Like, I honestly had no idea. It was just kind of hearsay. Like, I had tried to talk to a few players and I'd heard good things. The way that they kind of started off wasn't amazing. I know they obviously, like, at the kickoff, like, they beat London in the game 5, but it was like, okay, like, there's something here. And I think versus Florida, I don't know. It really is hard. I know I just gave a Browns example, my team, and now I'm thinking like, well, maybe not actually. I don't know. But yeah, I think that their respawn has been great. I'm really impressed by Paris. And Study, who obviously is my co-commentator, he knows the game backwards and forwards. Like, honestly, it's actually insane. Like, after a cast, he'll sit down with me and be like, you remember, like, on this round 2 of control, whenever this team was pushing, there was like 8 seconds left. The life count was like 5 versus 9. I'm like, what are you talking about? I have no idea what you're talking about. And he was talking about how impressed he was with, like, Paris in a few crucial situations, like how they had really, like, improved their control game. Like, you can kind of see the strides that they have made. And there are some very noticeable in-game adjustments and decision-making that's already improved. And I think if Scraps is playing the way that he is, I just like him a lot. And it kind of pains me because I think that Florida's a great team. Like coming into the year, I forget what podcast I was on, and somebody was like, "Who's your sleeper team for the season?" I'm like, "Florida." Like Florida's going to be great. I don't see how they aren't going to be good. And for me to be like, "Yeah, they're going to get knocked out by Paris and loses round 2 or elimination round 2," it sounds odd, but I think I do lean with Paris here. That one's for sure the harder matchup of the two to predict. And then obviously Minnesota versus Toronto, at least in terms of me predicting Toronto to beat or go past London. I think Minnesota wins it. I do, not just because I'm on the ROKKR podcast, but because I think their S&D is excellent. And I know that their hardpoint hasn't been great. And I don't know, I don't have an exact, prediction in terms of like, hey, are we going to see that improve in particular? But I don't know. I just like the group that Minnesota has. I think they've got the right pieces in play to make the proper decisions. And honestly, in 4v4, like not that, and don't get me wrong, like decision making is still the number one thing, but I just trust the communicators that you have on this roster. I think from an in-game perspective, this is a group where it's just like the team just fits. Like the team just works well. They obviously have chemistry with each other in terms of the duos that you combine for this team. So I think that Toronto could definitely cause a problem, but I think you've got the S&Ds locked down. I think you have a really good chance at the control. And who do they play? I think they played London in their very last series, which, granted, London, be as it may, but Minnesota like handled them pretty well in that hard point. So I think that's one that they're going to be working on for sure. I think that is like strictly their preparation is going to come in hard point. And because of that, sometimes you do see the S&Ds lack. But again, I don't know where to put. I don't really know where to put Toronto in terms of a few different situations. So I think it's going to be a good series. Don't get me wrong. I think Minnesota-Toronto is going to be good, but I think that Minnesota, at least in our 4 teams who are starting off in the losers bracket, are without a doubt my favorite to make it the farthest, given a path that I don't actually know. I don't know how the seeds fall. Like I don't know if Chicago, New York, like who falls where. But me being lazy and not looking all that stuff up ahead of time, I like Minnesota. I do. I like them in that series and moving forward.
So best opportunities is wherever, and it's, again, nothing against the Gorillas. They're just, if I was rating the teams that are in the top half of this, bracket, I would put the Gorillas at the bottom of the list. And whoever gets them in round 3 has the best opportunity to make it all the way to round 4. And so I think the Mutineers are going to unfortunately lose to Paris. I think it'll be a 3-1 or a 3-2. I was so high on the Mutineers. I said so many great things about them, but it is a different team. It's not the same team. They're a little bit different. If Slack shows up, then, who knows? I think you can't have one player that's always doing the right things and expect, it's like when LeBron was on the Cavs, they'd make it to the playoffs every year and that was it, except for the one time he got blasted in the finals when he was younger. And so I'd say with the ROKKR versus the Toronto Ultra, the ROKKR are so good at preparing. What happens to them, and it sounds like what Brian Saint has been talking to them about as a team, is that you have to win your ones. This is a game. This is 4v4. You can't just go for trades all the time, like in 5v5, where it's like you can die all you want. Like you can have 3 out of the 5 players can have negative KDs and you can win a hard point. Like this is a different game where you need either to all be kind of even or have a standout player and a couple of good guys and maybe somebody that just didn't do as well because they're rotating right. But this is a team game, has to be played well. The ROKKR are one of the best prepared teams in the league. And if they're winning their ones, they're very, very hard to beat. And that's how they beat Dallas, is they were winning their one-on-ones. And if you're doing that against the Dallas Empire and you're putting Krim in a blender and you can get one of the other players, which usually is Illy, if you can get Krim and Illy off their game, because Hook is going to show up, Shotzi is going to show up. If you can get Krim and Illy off their game, you can get a W. I think what the ROKKR are going to bring to the matchup against the Ultra, if the Ultra beat the Royal Ravens, is they're going to be so prepared as they usually are, and then they're going to win their ones, and they're going to take that series. I'd say it definitely could be a 3-2. The ROKKR have to pull off game 1. That's like, if they can just win game 1, I would almost say if they lose the series, something crazy happened, you know. Even if it goes to game 5, I think they could pull it out, but they have to win game 1, in my opinion. You don't want to get put on your heels against the Ultra team because they could easily take game 2 with their search ability. Obviously, the only 1v4 we've seen of the season from Methods, and they, 6-0'd Paris, which is a good team. And so I would say Minnesota ROKKR are going to move on, and Paris Legion are going to move on from that round, whoever they face.
Look at that. We're all pretty much in agreement so far. I just feel like the storylines, I mean, now watch, they'll come out and Surge will win and London Royal Ravens will win and then everything will be thrown off. But
yeah, right.
It is what it is. It's how this year has gone. You look at our predictions from this podcast, they look, I don't even want to mention them so far because we've just been all over the place. But when you don't have that much Call of Duty to go off of, sometimes that happens. Kingdom, I'm going to put you on the spot first. Let's go in reverse order here. Let's hop up to winners round 1.
Sir.
So let's just do both of those matches. Let's do Optic versus NYSL, LA Thieves versus LAG. I mean, those are two pretty spicy matchups there. So call them both. What do you got?
LA Thieves wins versus the Gorillas. They have a lot of blood in the water right now. They were just sitting pretty, like, we're going to prove that we're right up there with Atlanta Faze, and you guys have been underrating us and putting us in the wrong spot in your power rankings, and bam, just got smacked. Again, I'll refer to yesterday's timeline that nobody missed, I'm sure. LA Thieves got 3-0'd and by Dallas. They have something to prove. They're going to come out and beat the Gorillas. Now, I'm not saying the Gorillas are not, they've been doing good in search. They've been playing well together. You have this team of 3 who've won a championship, who won a world championship together, and they have the experience. So in Search and Destroy, they trust each other. That's important. So, but I still think the Thieves will win. I think they'll smoke them so much. I think they're number 1 in hardpoint in the league. They'll smoke them in the hardpoints, and that's 2 of the game modes. And so I think they can get the control as well. It'll probably be a 3-1. Oh, man. Optic versus New York.
This one's tough.
Is there a team in the league Clayster doesn't have a storyline with? This is because when you put that something else into the mind of Clay and he has something else to play for, this year he's already just playing to prove you dropped the wrong person. Like, he's playing, he is, I think, and I'm going to call it now, he will stay as one of the high statistical players throughout the season. Now, if people learn his play style and what he's doing, then maybe, it'll be picked up, like old school Clayster, Proofy, those type of guys. People started to try to learn what they were doing on the map and things like that because they were amazing anchors in Black Ops 2. And so I would say, if I call this for anything other than Optic, it's just really difficult for how good Optic has been and what they're doing. But I'm going to say it's going to be a 3-2. Clayster could yell his way through this series and they could win if you can get Optic on their heels. However, so I'll say this. I do not think Optic would have reverse swept New York like Dallas did. I think they have the potential, but I think they would have fallen apart a little bit. And like when they got beat by Atlanta Faze, in that Search and Destroy way back when, it was like, Scump said it. It was like, you had to try to forget the entire map. Like, it didn't even happen. Like, give me the neuralizer from Men in Black. I went 0-6. My team got 6-0'd. I don't want to remember it. New York's not going to do that to Optic. Optic have proved themselves like, we not only can be entertaining and make content and be funny and put people in the wrong tiers, but we also will win and we'll come out. And so I'm going to say Optic is going to win that 3-2 for one of the most awesome second round winners matches that we're going to get to see. The whole second round, in my opinion, if you have Optic versus Dallas and Faze versus LA, that's going to be an exciting day of Call of Duty.
LandO, who are you taking in those two?
Oh, it's hard, man. It is. I was honestly, I'm kind of making my decisions on the fly. I actually do have my pick'ems up off to the side, thinking like, okay, that was good. Yeah, I kind of brought up a good point. Okay, Kingdom brought up a good point too. Maybe Maybe an extra map here, maybe. No. Because yes, this is not gonna be a fun pick. I'm just like I already know
No.
I'm gonna like have a losers round one game just instantly go wrong, and it's like, oh, there goes the bracket. There it went.
Yep.
No, in terms of winners round one, I'll start off with Thieves and Gorillas just for my own sanity. I will go LA Thieves. Again, I think the Gorillas are good for sure. They had a good. They rounded out. Stage one beating Toronto in a game 5 through the S&Ds and the control. I want to say so. They're one game 5 away from being last in their group as well. Like if they don't win that series, they finish off 6th in their group, and those are like the little things that you have to be aware of just based off the head-to-heads. It's not just honestly your performance; it's based off the other teams and how they're performing. So I don't know. As much as I want to try to give Gorillas, something here, I do see the Thieves walking away with it. I think they're still a very strong team. And I think if you have certain guys kind of playing the way that they have, like TJ, have him going off the way that he is. There were talks that, Draza could be starting in place of him. Like, what's kind of the situation, between Temp and how everything kind of gets involved. So I think for them, it's great to see that TJ's playing up to the level that he has been. And I really trust a lot of the players on that roster to get that one done. And then on the top side, it's tough. It is. And I have to say, there's been a lot of talk about, a few different teams. Like the Thieves have been talked about a decent amount. Dallas Empire, obviously, recently with the Twitter drama and all that stuff. There have been a few rosters that have kind of been on the mind. And I feel like Optic kind of really hasn't been on the mindset, at least as of much. Like after their series versus Atlanta Faze, I feel like there really hasn't been a whole lot of chatter about them. Obviously there's always Optic chatter, but just not to the same extent like after the stage 1 performance and the way that they obviously kind of finish things off, because it's like they lose to Faze and it's like, oh, well, you're gonna get second seed. But I really like Chicago's respawns, and I think that New York are crafty. I think they've got a great team. That streak that they go on, where they're winning back-to-back 3-0s and whatnot is excellent. But I give it to Chicago. I do, and this may come as a surprise. I have it as a 3-0. Now, whenever I say 3-0, that isn't referencing that, they're going to get blown out. I trust them in the hard point more. I trust them in the S&D more, and I trust them in the control more. So I do have this as a 3-0 for them. It wouldn't surprise me again. Like I said, for me, this 3-0 prediction doesn't reflect that it's going to be a stop. It just reflects that I think Chicago is just going to be just enough better in all these modes. Like I said, I trust in YSL, like in terms of like draft buff, like I have 2 of their players on my team, so I'm hoping that they play well, obviously. But I just like Optic in this situation. And again, their respawns, they will humble you, man. They will humble you. Like Toronto ran into that on Checkmate. Like I thought that their controllers were unplugged. I didn't think they were actually playing. It was 222-7. Like it's just they just have the ability to do that. And I don't think the subletters are going to get blown out, but in terms of the positives, just the way that this team plays. And they have great comms. Like, again, New York has great comms. But Chicago, they're always a step ahead. They're always a step ahead. And for me, like you talk about, look out for Scump. You look out for Formal. Like, look out for Envoy in the flank. He's going to be flanking you constantly. He is going to mess with a lot of these younger players. And they're not, I don't say they're not used to this, but you have Scump and Formal, who are great players. You have Dashy, who is playing some of his best COD in a very long time. A very motivated Dashy at that. One of the best people at aiming I've ever seen in my entire life in Call of Duty history. And then you have Envoy, who's just constantly messing with you from the flank. So it's like you're like constantly swatting things out of the direction. You're trying to like get Envoy out of your face, and you got Dashy beaming you. And I think it's still a young team, and they're trying to figure it out. But I'd have Chicago winning it. And I know, like I said, I'm saying a 3-0, but it's not. I'm not saying it's going to be a dominant series. I just think that it's going to be Chicago in all 3 that close it out. Again, I think it could be a 3-1. Very well could go to Game 5. But I just trust Chicago, and I think that New York are going to get caught off guard in a few different areas. So.
Actually, I like that analogy a lot, that you're trying to get something accomplished, and you've got Envoy over here, and you've got Dashy, and meanwhile, you've got T2P just hitting you in the face. I mean, they really are. They put so much pressure in your face. They're a tough team to deal with. But for this one, I really think that LA Thieves versus LAG matchup is probably going to be a 3-0. I don't have a ton of faith in LAG overall. I do have them, like, I want to say 7th in my power rankings or somewhere in there, because they did have they had a solid super week, but when you really dive into it, They were able to beat Toronto, who knows what Toronto's really worth. And then they kind of got smoked by Optic. They kind of got smoked by Florida. They got smoked by Atlanta. So anytime they really played anybody that had a roster that's, pretty solid, they just didn't really come to play. So I would say that's a 3-0 there. The only thing that scares me about LA Thieves is their S&D, but I know that they've been playing great in S&D. I just don't know if you can count on TJ to continue to play the way that he's been playing in S&D. I feel like that might be a little bit of an anomaly. Not that he's not going to continue to play well. I just don't know if he can continue to play that well. I don't think anybody can really continue to play that well. So that scares me a little bit. But when it comes to their respawns, I mean, they're the first overall team in the league in hardpoint, third overall in control. I think it's going to take a special team to beat LA Thieves in the respawn. So I got LA Thieves in this one 3-0. I could see them losing the S&D, in which case it would be a 3-1, but I'm going 3-0. And then in that Optic New York match, I don't know. The thing with Optic is it just always comes back to kind of put a little bit of doubt in my head is what's going to happen in that S&D. And after that S&D happens, what type of momentum are you going to give a Clayster-led team? And I don't think that they're going to end up losing this. I mean, Optic's the second overall hardpoint team in the game. And I think Asim, the way he's been playing and Diamond Con's been playing great. I think that this is a little bit different level of a beast here when you're talking about respawns. So I think Optic comes out, wins the hardpoint. I think that they probably drop the S&D. I think Optic's like 7th right now in the league in S&D. And that's just because they started off so poorly and what happened against Atlanta and stuff like that. But I think that eventually they'll get it figured out. By the time we get to like the stage 2 major or the 3rd major, I think we're going to see a different Optic team when it comes to S&D. So I think they'll probably drop the S&D, but after that, they're the best control team in the league. And then you have another hard point. I think it'll probably be a 3-1, but that would put Optic and LA Thieves through, which would set up a couple crazy, these winners round 2 matches, if this is what happens, you end up getting Dallas versus Optic and Faze versus LA Thieves. I don't even know how you begin to go about breaking those down. I tried to do it in a video and it just seemed like I was just talking myself in circles because you can make a point for Dallas, you can make a point for Optic, you can make, it seems like whichever way you want to look at these matchups, you can make a point for either of these squads. And we've played so little official Call of Duty that it's really tough to point towards anything. So I'm going to go ahead and take a step back, and I'm not going to be the first one to take a stab at it. So Kingdom, congratulations, man. Who you got in those
awesome. Two? Well, I'll say whoever fall. Well, let me say this. Optic is the best control team. Clayster is the best control player. In search, you've got Clay up there. You've got Asim up there when it comes to KD. In hardpoint, you've got Asim up there. You've got Envoy as the all-time hill time leader, but Mac is on that same list. Diamond Con's top 5 with Clayster in overall KD. That series is going to be bananas. And the point I want to make is whoever falls out of that match is going to be one of the scariest teams in the lower bracket.
Yeah,
I would not want to see either of them in round 3. I wouldn't want to see New York or Optic in round 3. I wouldn't want to see LAG either if I was any of the teams in the lower bracket. But I'd rather see LAG than either of those two teams. In round 2 of the winners bracket, if we're saying that Optic is going to face off against Dallas, and that's a big if, like all of these teams are great that are up there in the winners bracket. Every team on this, graphic is amazing, but I would say, oh my gosh,
it's tough.
Well, whoever wins round 2 between Optic, Dallas, and Faze, if only one of them goes to the winners final, I think they'll win the whole thing. So it's a hard call. If the Thieves go to the winners final, I think they could lose to whoever comes from the upper bracket, if it's Optic or Dallas. But if only Dallas goes to the winners final and Faze doesn't go, I would right there predict that Dallas would win the whole major. If only Faze goes to the winners final and Dallas gets knocked down to losers, I would say that Faze was probably going to win the entire tournament. Because I'm guessing in the grand final, you have to win 2 best-of-5s or whatever in order to win. I'm going to say that this is going to be a crazy match. Probably a 3-0, but the closest 3-0 we've seen, as close as the one New York had earlier in the season, when it was like they got 3-0'd, but it was literally like 1 point or 2 points in hard point, 1 round in search, game 5 in the control. Like, I think whatever happens there, that's what's going to happen. How do I predict this? I'm going to say I'm going to give it to, that's going to be Dallas's first game. I'm going to give it to Dallas if they follow preparation. So I'm going to say Dallas 3-0, very close games. And then Optic is probably going to make the greatest, losers bracket run ever if that happens. And it could go 3-0 the other way. This is the hardest to call match of the tournament, in my opinion. And then I'm going to say Faze will beat whoever they see. They haven't been touched yet. They're number 1 in search. If they go up against the Thieves, it'll be great, though, because the Thieves, I think, are number 1 in hardpoint. So you're looking at, like, what if they both take those game modes and we go to a game 5? It'll be great to watch. Like, it'll be freaking awesome. Because what if that's when TJ decides to show up and, go 12-2 or, 13-5 or something crazy, and so I think Atlanta Faze will be in the winners final no matter who they face. I'm going to say my prediction, if I can even do this, I don't know how we're going to put this on the sheet, is that Optic Dallas is going to be a 3-0 in either direction. But I'll say Dallas for now. Good luck.
Lando, what you got there? Actually, Lando, let us know who you have just in the tournament finals, in the grand finals from winners bracket. Who you got there?
In the major final, my 2 teams who are in it.
Yep.
Oh my gosh. Okay, hold on.
Let's see. So call the winners round 2, and then who ends up winning out of the winners finals to make it to the grand finals.
Oh, I see. I'm sorry. Okay. So process of elimination quickly. Dallas v Optic. This one's hard. Oh my god. I don't.
So tough.
This is the hardest match to call, in my opinion.
Yeah,
that we've called yet. Both of these teams would beat every other team except Faze in the league. I would predict both of these teams to beat every other team.
Oh my god. I'm going to go to the other one really quick. I'm going to go to the voters below it really fast. I need some time. I'm going to go to Atlanta Faze versus Los Angeles Thieves. This one's just easier for me to think about. Again, I think the Thieves have looked excellent. Don't get me wrong. I think the Thieves have looked excellent. I need to get back in my box. I'm off to the side here. I think the Thieves have looked excellent in a number of different ways. Obviously, to start off the league, the way that they did, it was great. They've had a number of different, phenomenal performances. I just think when it comes down to strictly weapons, I think that Atlanta Faze has the weapons necessary to get this one done. I really do. And there's a lot of people who, and I actually had a conversation. Who was I interviewing? I think it was Simp, or maybe it was Arcides. I don't remember which one. And I was like, it's kind of funny that you guys are sitting at 4-0. I think it was 5-0 at the time. And, there's critiques. It's like, hey, this could have been better. It's like, we're 5-0. It's like, what do you want to critique if we're 5-0 right now? It's like that is the level that this team, this is the skill that we know this team has. And I don't want to get in the dynasty conversation by any means, but when we're talking about just a 3-player combo that you have, I mean, take whichever players you want. Just the players, the young players that they have who are now in their primes, it just looks like that. And I don't know if we're ever going to see a for sure dynasty be formed until maybe the league expands years down the line, just because of how great the competition is.
Yeah,
probably.
He'll stop every potential dynasty. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, you're good. I think that Faze have the most weapons. I mean, Arcides has not been playing great, yet they're 5-0. Simp had a slow series not too long ago, and then he just comes out with a 1v3 clutch in the raid S&D, just, at the drop of a dime. He just turned up. I remember in that game 4 hardpoint, just went off. It's this is a team that, despite going down at times or whatever it may be, I think they've learned a lot from last year. I trust the amount of weapons that they have, and so I think that Faze walked away with it. I think it's going to be a 3-1. I know you guys talk about their, the Thieves' strength in a few different modes. I think that could definitely kind of shine through. But again, I like the players that they have for LAT, but I don't know if we're going to see.
What about that other match landed?
I know. All I want to do is talk about this one so I can just get out of it. Tell you what, I'm just going to jump straight to a prediction. I have Optic winning this 3-2. Now I would not be shocked of any combination outside, and I know Kingdom called a 3-0. I know it's a close 3-0. I would be shocked if this is a blowout for either side. Like, this should not be a blowout. And again, as I say that, I'm sure this is going to be clipped if it's shown to be, just a few days later. But I don't see this being a blowout. I have Optic winning this, and I think that there are a few different reasons for it. Again, I just think that Optic's respawn is at a certain level right now. I think Dallas at times looks great. Sometimes they have shown a little bit slow during a few certain moments, but I just think that people are going to start to realize how talented Dashy is. Like, they're going to start to figure out this guy is the real deal. And when I say that, and I know, Keenan, you referenced earlier, like, how long you've been watching COD. Like, I think I've been watching COD since, like, Black Ops 1. I have never in my life, watched a lot of COD, commentated a lot of COD, never in my life seen somebody aim like Dashy. I watched a video that he posted on YouTube the other day, and I got chills because of the way that he was aiming with the XM4. It was Garrison Hardpoint. Or no, it was Garrison S&D. He was playing in a 2 versus 4, and the other team was getting destroyed. They were getting destroyed. He's playing a league play 2v4 game. He's destroying them. The aim that he has, the skill that this team has, I really like him a lot. I think this is an Optic team that's going to be very difficult to beat. Again, I think you have a very gritty Empire. And my predictions are not going to make sense as we progress along. Like, I'm looking at my pick'ems, and I'm kind of codifying it, if that makes sense. Like, the team that you predict, like, has to go through some wars. It's not going to be like, oh yeah, Optic's going to win this, and then Optic's going to win that. It's like, oh no, Optic's going to beat Dallas, and then Dallas later on is going to beat Optic, and then Faze is going to come. Like, you have to mess it up. Like, you have to scribble all over it. So that's going to happen for sure. In my winners final, that'd be Faze v Optic. Dear God, I just gave so much props to Optic. On my pick'ems, I have Faze in a 3-1, and for the sake of just
that makes sense.
Moving on, I'm just going to go with Faze. And then, am I predicting the major final or not?
Not yet.
Okay,
let's hold off.
Hold off. Thank goodness that's over. Oh, wow. Okay.
All right. So I'll just it's weird that we've been in agreement in basically everything. You guys differed in who's going to win that Optic versus Empire matchup. I do think, I'll just get it right out of the way, that I think Atlanta is going to be the team that makes it through into the grand finals from winners bracket. Whenever I look at that squad, especially with how they've been playing, they're top 2 or 3 in every single game mode. And when I think about their players, like, sure, like LandO, like you mentioned, like Simp has a down event, and then he comes up and he just drops a pin, and all of a sudden he's clutching 1v3s and winning search, and that's the type of player he is. And when I look at that roster across the board, I know that it's too early to start talking about dynasties, but those guys are so good. Like, if you tell me, okay, you're going to have an expansion Call of Duty team and you got to pick a player to start with, I'll take any of them. That you can't really say that for too many teams. Like, if you look at Simp and Abizi, which SMG duo are you going to take over them? Maybe Huke and Shotzi, maybe Envoy and Scump, but probably not. And outside of that, I mean, who are you going to take? When it comes to flex, I mean, Celium just does his thing. He goes about his business. He never comes out. And I know there's been some drama on the timelines lately, but Celium comes out. He always clutches up. He always makes the plays. He just, he stays quiet, goes about his business. Love that about Celium. Might there be a flex or two that's better? Dashy's been playing phenomenally. Absolutely. There might be a couple others out there. And then when it comes to main AR, we haven't seen the RCs that we probably expected to see, but I can probably promise you that it's coming. I mean, when it comes to RC, he's such a good in-game leader. He's always making the calls.
That's what
I really thought that Optic was going to miss what RC's brought to the table. And we haven't quite seen them in a high-pressure scenario yet with this roster. So will Dashy be able to provide the IGL stuff that Arcees did? Probably not. His gunning in this game is probably a little bit better, so that stuff might, weigh itself out evenly. But I have Atlanta in that matchup against LA Thieves. I don't think it'll be a 3-0. I've been saying this since the start of the year that when it comes to LA Thieves, I think LA Thieves can go as far as TJ and Kenny take them. And so far, they've played great. Last year, you would watch them play, and Kenny would drop a 1.3 one match, and then he'd come back the next day and drop a 0.7, and OGLA would get smoked. And this year, Kenny has been phenomenal. Kenny's played great. TJ has played great. I don't know if it's a vibe thing, if it's everybody's happy to be back with LA Thieves and be underneath the umbrella of that org, but LA Thieves they've been playing fantastic. So I don't think that this is going to be a blowout. And this is the other thing with Atlanta, if they're ever in a map 5, who's going to beat them in a map 5 S&D? They're so good, and they have just a unique clutch factor about them. So even if somehow it does make it to a map 5, I don't see how LA Thieves beats them in a map 5 S&D, especially if it goes round 11. Last year, towards the end of the year in Modern Warfare and in Champs, I know the rosters were a little bit different and the scenario wasn't the same, but that was a squad that was by far and away the number one team when it came to map 5 win-loss and round 11 S&D win-loss. So I think Atlanta makes it through all the way to the tournament finals. And that other matchup, Empire versus Optic, right now we can talk and we have a little bit about how good Optic is at respawns, and I feel like Dallas has a little bit of an edge in S&D, and you could go position by position. I feel like you're probably getting a little bit more out of the SMG position from Dallas with what Hugh has been doing and how good shots he is. We haven't quite seen the scump that we've seen in years past, but not that he's been underperforming by any means. And then, Dashy and Celium. Dashy's been playing great. Arcees and Formal. Those are basically a coin flip to me. But I feel like if this was to come to a round 5, I just have a little bit more trust in Dallas in a map 5 S&D. I feel like it wouldn't shock me if Optic comes out and absolutely shreds in the respawns and ends up winning 3-1. But if it does go to that map 5, I just feel like with how long that roster has been together and kind of just the composure and the chemistry that Dallas squad has, I think as of right now, they probably have an edge when it comes to a map 5 S&D. So I have Atlanta versus Dallas in the winners finals. I'm going to say it's a 3-2 there for Dallas over Optic. And then kind of the same thing. I don't even know if it'll go a map 5 between Dallas and Atlanta. I think Atlanta, even though maybe they haven't looked super dominant so far, especially in that matchup against Optic. In that match with Optic, if Abizi doesn't absolutely go off and have the play of the season so far, if he doesn't get that 3-piece rotating to P4 on Moscow Hardpoint,
they lose.
They end up losing that 3-1, and now Optic's the number one team. And what are we saying about Optic? Because those S&D lulls wouldn't even really be a topic of conversation. So, there's a lot of stuff that goes into it, but I'm putting Atlanta through here. I think that they're so good, and until somebody knocks them down a peg or two, I'm going to continue to say that they'll win. So I think all of us agree that Atlanta's probably the squad that's making it to the grand finals from winners bracket, which takes us to the losers bracket. And I don't even know. At this point in time, that bracket is so jumbled. I don't even know how you go about predicting each one of those. But let's just go ahead and let's just do like kind of an overarching kind of, if you look at that losers bracket, you have LA Thieves down there. You'd have Optic down there. You'd have Minnesota down there. You'd have, the level of talent. New York would be down there still. The level of talent that exists in the losers bracket at this point, it gets so jumbled. I don't even know how we would call each one of these matches. But let's just say, who do we believe in has the ability to make a losers bracket run and reach it to the grand finals against Atlanta? Lando, let's go with you first here. Who do you think? Who do you think makes that losers bracket run and makes it to grand finals against Atlanta?
So I'll say this. I've actually been kind of taking a look at my pick'ems and kind of going back and forth about a few things. So I know this is kind of in the middle of nowhere, but I'm currently in elimination round 4, trying to decide whether or not Who wins between LA Thieves and New York Subliners? That is currently my debacle that I'm facing.
I have that match too. Yep.
And that one's kind of the kink in the hose. Like, I don't really have anything after that. So let's see here. So since I do have Dallas Empire getting knocked out in winners round 2, they would then go into elimination round 4, at least in my predictions. I have them taking on ROKKR. After that, I don't know if they take on the Thieves or Subliners. I'm still debating that one. And then I do have Faze beating Optic in my winners final. So that means that in my eyes, what I think will happen is that I think in terms of like runs, I think Minnesota makes a run. Depending on where I sit, I think that there is a potential for New York to make a run. And my bracket just froze, so that's kind of ticking me off. One moment, let me refresh. Oh, come on. Is this actually gonna happen? Thank you for popping up the bracket. I'm trying to pull up this and it's not working out. All right, so again, I think New York has the potential to make a run. I think the team that will make the most like series, in terms of like how far they can get, I think Minnesota will be that team. I just don't know how a few of these rosters are going to be able to stand up against the big dogs. So in terms of my grand final, I've got one that's kind of familiar. I think I'm going to have Faze versus Dallas in my Major 1 final. Oh my God.
It's impossible.
I just don't know. Like if I was in the casting booth for this one, I'd just be like, we're just going to have fun. This is going to be a great one. One thing to consider, and I didn't actually know this until I was looking at pick'ems. It says best of 9. I didn't know that. So something to consider.
I didn't know that either.
Yep. So that adds a whole new element into it of like, okay, well, last time we saw a long-running series, right? Obviously, it was Dallas who was able to withstand Atlanta. They looked great. They brought up a number of different strategies. They made FaZe look human, and even that's a kind way to put it. But now with Clayster gone, do they lose some of that? Are the young guys going to step up? FaZe now totally different, or not totally different, but a different team in comparison to last season, where now they have this kind of new addition in Arcides. How does he kind of come into the comms and change things? Oh, I think I'm going to go FaZe, but it's not a confident answer by any means. Again, I think I don't even know where you go from here, like 5-3, 5-4. I mean, I don't really know. I hope it goes 5-4. I hope it goes down to the wire, because I think that, there's just so many scenarios to kind of consider. It wouldn't surprise me if we see Dallas win this, and at least in terms of who I have making it to the major final. But I don't know. I trust FaZe at this stage, and I think they've got, like I said, a lot of weapons. I think you have not seen the best of a lot of them yet. Abizi can turn up. I mean, again, Simp. I know that people do adjusted KDs. If you guys look at his adjusted KD, it's just unbelievable. Like his consistency, not just in the respawns, but also in search and destroy. It's just like it's out of this world. And then again, like, who's playing well? There's so many things to consider. But I think that I'm gonna go with FaZe to be my major winner. And do they win it 5-3, 5-4? I have no idea. I'm just gonna press a button and just say that FaZe wins. If I have the ability to do that, just on and off switch. On to FaZe. Yeah. There we go. That's it. That's what I've got. Oh,
Kingdom, what do we got out of you, man?
Oh, sorry. So adjusted KD, Simp has a 1.28, according to GG Breaking Point. But they tweeted that on the 28th. Clayster has a 1.3, and Hook has a 1.29. So with adjusted KD, they put Clayster over Hook by 0.01. And then Dashy is 4th, followed by Diamond Khan. And so, so the losers bracket's going to be spicy. I think Minnesota won't have a lot of problems until they run into maybe LA. If they run into New York early, you can't lose the memory of that stomping they took to New York. I don't know how you get that out of your head and you just imagine that Asim is going to play like a monster. Because he's going to remember that. And, once you hit flow state in COD, if no one on the other team is in that, you're in trouble. And that's what Asim hit when they beat the ROKKR. He just was in a flow state, couldn't miss. He was just like, I'm just going to kill all of them repeatedly. shoot them from wherever. If I see a person, it's over. That hard point was just ridiculous. I don't think I've seen a raid hard point like that. And I would say that Optic and Dallas will meet again in the elimination final. And Dallas will move on to the grand final. However, depending on if Optic gets knocked out when I say they're getting knocked out rather than where you guys say they're getting knocked out, that means they're going to have 2 other matches under their belt when they face off against Dallas again. And they do have the potential to go to the grand final. If it's Optic, I would have Faze winning 5-3. If it's Dallas, it's hard not to pick Faze to win right now. If it's Dallas, though, I'm going to say Dallas is going to win 5-4. This team, the only reason we're not picking them to be just as good as Faze is because Faze looked human or got exposed a little bit by Florida, and everybody says it was a fluke. It wasn't really a fluke. They came out and said they were underprepared. They thought they were way better. They were playing a little too cocky, like whatever the reason was. Crowder said they were preparing wrong. They weren't ready for it. And, of course, they're playing better now because they're better prepared for these matches. But that feeling seeps into younger players a lot easier than it does to someone like Crimsix. That kind of feeling of we beat them. And I think that's what happened to the young players on New York when they got reverse swept. They're like, we beat Dallas. Let's go. No, you didn't. You lost that control, and then you lost the rest. Like, because once you knew, you were like, wait a minute. They just beat us. Okay, you get nervous. It kills your flow state, all of that. You get nervous. They couldn't stay in it. And it's because Dallas had nothing but ice on that raid control. That team, Dallas is a very scary team. Losing to the ROKKR is all that makes us think that they're not as unbeatable as Faze is, and how they've won. You know, they had to reverse sweep, and, you know, it's like, so we're thinking that because they bring it to game 5 that they're not as good of a team, but a win is a win. Krim said that on Twitter when somebody tweeted out that how much better statistically Clayster was than him. And this was before they played each other. And he was like, yeah, but post the team stats, like post the records, you know? And it's true. And so I would say Dallas definitely has the potential to beat Faze and make them look a little human. It's going to be difficult. If it's Optic, I say Faze win. 5-3, they win by 2 maps. But if it's Dallas, I say they lose by 1 map. And I know that's a crazy prediction, but I just can't count out this Dallas Empire team. I never have, even though I really was hoping for Clayster to get that W. It would have been amazing. The storylines would have been great. But if Dallas started in the losers bracket, I would say good luck to all those other teams. Like, that would not be fun if the Dallas Empire was starting in, you know, like round 2 of losers. Like, good luck, everybody else. So that's my prediction. Optic Dallas in the elimination final. And those are my 2 ways that it could end up, is either Dallas or Faze will win this.
Yeah, I will say that this is nearly impossible. I mean, each one of these teams they're so talented, and so many of these maps and modes comes down to one player making a split decision to hit a flank and get a 2-piece in control. Or, I mean, it's so hard to predict which player of these top 48 players in the world is going to make the one play when almost every single one of them are capable of making that play. So that's what makes these things so tough, but it is fun to talk about them. When it comes to that losers bracket run, I think that Optic probably makes a pretty strong run here. And I think if they do make a pretty strong run here, I think watch out, because you could see the momentum build and the confidence build, and you could see them, I mean, the way I have it is it would be Optic versus Minnesota. None of these matches are easy by any means. And then in which case you would have Optic versus the winner of LA Thieves or New York Subliners. Again, I mean, how do you even predict these? But if Optic goes on that run and they end up meeting up with Dallas in the elimination or the losers bracket finals, that's going to be an unbelievable match. But either way, I think whoever ends up winning that just isn't enough for Dallas. The only thing that I could see getting in the way is the fact that those teams will have had the opportunity to go on a bit of a run. And we've seen in the past, like like the losers bracket run that Los Angeles Thieves went on back when they were 100 Thieves back in Black Ops 4, that monumental losers bracket run that they went on. We've seen how these teams can fall into losers bracket. They can pick up a couple wins. They can build, momentum and chemistry and morale. And all of a sudden you're in the grand finals playing a Faze team that hasn't played in a couple days and has 3 less matches under their belts. And you can't underestimate how much that does for a team. So I do think, even though I had Optic losing to Dallas in winners round 2, I think Optic is actually going to beat Dallas in that elimination final, just because they would have had the momentum and the opportunity to play many more matches there. I think Optic ends up going into that tournament finals. And again, until somebody does it, and until Atlanta loses consistently in a map 5 search and destroy, I just don't see how it happens. I just don't see. We saw it all throughout last year until, of course, champs finals, and Dallas was able to do it. But I don't even think this Dallas team is capable of putting on that type of performance in a super clutch, map 5 or map 9 S&D. I think that they're missing a lot with Clay, and that's a whole different storyline. But I just think until Faze loses a map 5 or a map 9 in a big time scenario like this, I'm just not sure that I'm going to pick away from them until I actually see it happen. So I'm going to have Faze over Optic. I don't know. If it's best of 9, I don't know if it'll be 5-1, 5-2. Who knows? But it just always stays in my mind that I just don't see them losing in a clutch S&D until it happens. So I'm going to go with, I think we all agreed, right? Atlanta's going to end up winning this first major.
Oh, somehow, some way. Oh my God.
Right,
it's like, one thing that I want to say really quick before we move on, or before we transition, is that one thing that people have to consider is that whenever you are making your bracket predictions, there are a lot of little things that, and I know that we're not on LAN, so it's not as maybe noticeable, or at least maybe as noteworthy, but there are so many intangibles that make a difference, right? In terms of how you react to losing. Has this team been in the losers bracket before? Certain teams early on in the bracket, whenever we talk about pressure, like I said, it was Nameless who made the comment about how these games, I know you mentioned earlier, Kingdom, are possibly roster change series. There could be a roster who's like, hey, I know my roster's fine. We're going to be fine. Let's go into it. Whenever you're playing desperate, or you're playing with knowing your career is on the line, there is a different depth that you're willing to go to. And stuff like that, along with, just a number of different factors. I know you brought it up, IKON, losers bracket runs, teams coming off of a loss. The schedule is huge in regards to the way that a few of these matches fall. Let's say that, you lose, let's say, one of the teams drops on Friday. Tell you what, you're not going to be playing until Saturday, and that one team who you lost is going to be coming off of a victory, most likely. So it's there's going to be a lot of crossing of paths that I think a lot of people aren't going to be prepared for, and there's going to be a lot of situations where things that it's hard to kind of think about, things that it's kind of hard to envision, will be taking place as the series progresses, in terms of momentum, in terms of teams off a loss, and desperation, all kinds of different things. So just wanted to add that in there because, I know we're not on LAN, but those things still do apply. And when we talk about the level of talent that exists primarily, not just in the CDL, but outside of the CDL, that teams are looking at, teams are envisioning, thinking about, it's there. And so I think these matches are going to be fun for a number of different reasons, and sometimes for reasons that we may not be thinking about, at least as of right now.
I was thinking about Crim 6's 1v2. We didn't even mention it. On Control in round 11. And how clutch that play was. If he played it any other way, they don't win that round. And I was wondering if the two of you agree with me that this is one of the more clutch. Now, last year we saw a lot of game 5s, but we had to watch domination, unfortunately, to get there. I feel like Control has created so many clutch moments, and S&D in every series creates these clutch moments. Even watching Methods 1v4 for a 6-0, it was a clutch moment, because you wanted him to get a 6-0 at that point. When TJ in that last round, when he had streaks for his 12-0, I think he got 2 kills that round. this game seems to hedge on who is the more clutch team when teams are equally matched, and so many of these teams are equally matched. So when they face up, it's really like who's going to bring the ice in that moment. And I was wondering if the two of you kind of feel like this is a league where the 3-0 doesn't tell the story. A 3-1 doesn't even tell the story of a series. It's really what team clutched up, because a 3-0 can be a lot closer than a 3-2, that somebody lost.
Yeah, I mean, just on that stance, I think until we see a potential like league expansion, I think it's going to be, you might have maybe these 3 teams are a little bit ahead of everybody else. Maybe these 1 or 2 teams are a little bit behind everybody else, but everything in the middle, I just feel like it's so tough to call which way a lot of these are going to go, just because everybody's so good. Everybody's so close. I mean, I broke down that play that you're talking about with Crimsix, and it was such a smart play. He got the kill on Slasher. He slid out over towards the right side of Airplane just to make Temp think that he was going to try to hit a flank and kill him from behind. And as soon as the kill cam was over, he ran back, instantly got on the bomb, defused, and it was literally
Genius.
like it was 0.2 of a second that Temp jumps around the corner. I mean, it just plays like that how could you ever predict that map in and map out? So until the talent disparity gets spread out a little bit, I just feel like it's, who's going to be the more clutch team. And that's what I love so much about Atlanta, is I just feel like you put Simp in a clutch scenario. I mean, this guy is an assassin. I mean, he's going to make that play 9 out of 10 times. And oh, by the way, Abizi's there, which is probably getting a first blood, and he's putting you in a 4v3 scenario. And then, oh, by the way, you have Celium, which gets a 1v2 to end up clutching the search and destroy against Paris. I mean, it's just, that's why I feel so strongly against or for Atlanta, just because I see when all these teams are so close, I feel like they've got that Tom Brady clutch factor, and they're going to make it happen. So that's what I see based on that sort of scenario.
Yeah, I was gonna say too, like, well, this is something that I think it was one of the casts I had brought up with Study. We were actually kind of filling some downtime, and as we were kind of talking more about Search and Destroy, it kind of made me realize it's like, and I know that we said this last year, but it's really true. Like, this is the most competitive that Call of Duty has ever been, and we may not be able to ever say that again. That's something that we have to kind of realize, like, with possible expansion and coming into next year, like. Obviously last year it was the ability to say it, but because we went from 16 to 12 teams, and now we've gone from 12 teams to 12 teams, but we got rid of a player. So this will probably be, and I don't obviously know anything, but like, I don't think we're ever going to be able to have the situation again where we're going to say it's this competitive. And I think because of that, the same that you brought up, Kingdom, with like that clutch factor, to me, like Search and Destroy has never been more important, because we talk about teams, they don't really want to scrimmage it all that often. And I think it was Crowder who had brought it up. I think it was on like Crowder Hour, his podcast, or on another one, like Hard Points. But he was like, we've been playing this mode, Search and Destroy, since like 2007. Like, what is the issue with teams not grinding it or playing it as often as they need to? And I think that this year, teams who take Search and Destroy super seriously, teams who can find and it's not easy to do because you always see it, right? Teams who are good at Hardpoint. Okay, well, we're good at Hardpoint. We're not good at Search and Destroy. They start working on Search and Destroy. Now they start losing in Hardpoint. It's like to find that blend is so hard, and the teams that do tend to win tournaments, at least in that time period. It's kind of like, you have to have everything match up, and when it does, it's like there's the moment. And I think that now that, we always talk about Hardpoint. Like, Hardpoint is always talked about, right? It's like that's the number one stat that we reference outside of like overall KD, but it's like Hardpoint. Search and Destroy, I think, is now so important for these very reasons, because we're probably never going to, and I know we've seen a lot of 3-0s and stuff, but just in terms of like top caliber teams, as the year progresses, I think a lot of the rosters just aren't in the same atmosphere as a few other ones, just in terms of just, the reason why we're seeing dominant victories. It always happens at the start of a title. But I think we're going to see so many Game 5s as the season progresses. It just continues to showcase how important that Game 5 is, how important that clutch factor is. I feel like like if this was like a paragraph, right? It kind of makes things more in bold. Like your hard point has to be fine tuned. Your search and destroy, you better be playing it. You better be practicing it. Control, it's the swing mode. Like everything is now intensified to a point where it's like you have to be on your game, and if you're not, you're going to get destroyed because every other team is going to be preparing for you. And so I just think to kind of wrap a bow on it. The way that this league works and the talent that exists out there, and because of, again, I don't think we're ever going to be able to say that this is the most talented or the most difficult time to ever win in Call of Duty history. I think it consistently incentivizes search and destroy to be a factor, and that's also the reason why I have Faze taking it, because, again, you have somebody in a 1v2 situation. I trust Simp, I trust Abizi, I trust Celium, and I darn sure trust Arcides. I trust each one of those guys in a situation where it's like tournaments on the line, they got to clutch up, because I've seen Simp do it in a number of different tournaments that no one is ever going to watch. With 5 viewers on the line, the guy is just, it's just natural. It's just natural for him. It's natural for each one of them. And not that any other team doesn't have that capability, but I just trust them in those situations. And I think they learned a lot from last year and are only going to carry that forward. They're my favorite team who made a roster change in the offseason, outside of ROKKR, to be totally honest, because I love what ROKKR did. But in terms of like a one-man move, team that fit perfectly, Arcides was literally the perfect fit in my eyes. So,
yeah, I 1,000% couldn't agree more. I think we're all kind of in agreement there, and what makes Faze so special and why so many people have confidence in them. But let's go ahead and let's round this up with just somewhat of a spicy question here. Let's just give a hot take after this major. Do you foresee, and I'm a little bit shocked that we haven't seen it so far or even heard talks of it, do you foresee any sort of team change? Do you think that there's a roster that maybe could have a team change? Do you think that everybody should stay put? It's too early. So let's just end on a 30, 40-second hot take. Kingdom, what do you think? Do you think after the first major we see a potential roster change? And who do you think it would be if you do foresee one coming?
Yeah, but I think the only teams that would make a roster change are London, Ultra, Surge, or Florida. I think London already has a pending roster change coming, so they may not make a swap. I don't know. Maybe they hit up Wuskin and be like, "Hey, you've been playing?" I think honestly, London is, and these are the 12 best teams in the world. London is the worst of the best, and that's, in my opinion, kind of clear. I wouldn't pick them to beat any of these teams. Now, they could on any given Sunday, but I wouldn't pick them. I wouldn't predict that they were going to at this point. I don't think Ultra makes a change, even if, because Kleenex, Cammy, Methods, like, these are all great players. Like, they just got to get it together. I don't think Ultra makes a change no matter what. If I'm Florida, I don't even want to say this out loud, because I don't know what they would do. I don't know if they swap some players with the Surge and just try to mix it up, but if it's not working, it's not working. Like that, then, and there's something about both of those teams, the Surge and Florida, where it's not working. And like last year with the Huntsmen, they were like, or we can say Chicago because it's the same team, but like they kind of dropped Gunless, even though he had some clutch plays and all this kind of stuff, and whatever was going on. Or benched him or whatever. And I don't think Gunless is the factor on the Surge. I don't know what it is, but they may need to move some people just to figure it out. Maybe send Pristini back to Florida. Honestly, I think the Ravens will do something for sure. I don't know what they're going to do though, but they'll do something for sure. And then maybe Florida and Surge swap some players. Whoever loses that match and is out of this in the beginning, I think they'll look for a potential change. But this is the first major, but this is not, I said it on our show 2 weeks ago, this is not whose line is it anyway. The points do matter. And if you're leaving the first major with no points and you got barely any points already because you haven't really won any matches during the league itself, the struggle is real and you might not make it to champs. And we talked about this last year on our show, IKON, early in the year. Like, you got to get points early. The teams that aren't are going to be in trouble come champs, and you do not want to have to worry going into the second major, like, if we don't get any points now, we just don't have a chance to go to champs, you know. And so since points go with the team rather than the players, which I think is great, I think one of those two teams, whoever loses between Florida and Surge and the London Royal Ravens, will be looking to make a change.
LandO, foresee anything?
I definitely do. Every time that I'm always like, oh, you know, maybe not. Then I realize, oh, yeah, this is called an esports, by the way. So something's going to happen. And now with stages, too, like, this is something that people have to consider. Like, honestly, I love the addition of stages because this kind of gives, I know it's only a week, but, like, now you've got kind of these clumps of time where it's like, hey, now we can add in, and I don't know, but, like, in the future, like, if we want to add in different maps, if we want to, you know, add snipers back. It's not just like, hey, in the middle of the season, oh my gosh, you know, so-and-so, they got to play with no snipers. And, you know, now we get, there's a perfectly even playing field to where now we have these gaps to where, you know, it's like, you know, you have stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, you have different portions where you can make decisions. So I think not only is that great just for Call of Duty, teams are also going to evaluate themselves in the same way. I don't think that we're going to see, you know, some massive roster mania period after stage 1. I think as time goes on, we'll start to see more moves. I think stage 2 will be a major shifting period, major, you know, however you want to define that. And then, you know, you talk about stage 3. I think stage 2 will probably be the one because there's going to be a lot of teams who like hold on to that one player where they're like, maybe, and then it's like, no, okay, this isn't going to work out. There's going to be teams that like hold on to hope, and then they're like, okay, this is not happening. But I think a lot of rosters, and just to go off of this particular stage, you know, after this, you know, this final is over, again, and we go back to this topic of teams being hungry. Everybody's hungry, and I think it was Kenny Smith, and I know we all like the NBA here. Kenny Smith had this one quote that I absolutely love, and I don't know exactly what it is. I'm not going to butcher it, but he essentially says, everybody, whenever you're winning, right, the player who is starting in that position, they are always under the assumption that they're the reason why it happened. But whenever they lose, they're always aware that they think it was somebody else who caused the problem. So it's like you're always in a situation where it's like, it's not me, it's them, or it's me, it's not you. I think that happens a lot in COD, and so I think that will happen this stage. I know that London's kind of an easy one to say in terms of like, you know, they're obviously playing with the fill-in, like, hey, Parasite, you know, this just didn't go well. We'll move on to somebody else, potentially. I have no idea. But I do agree. I think that Florida, Seattle, I think that Seattle would probably be more willing to make a change. Florida, I will say, had some pretty good roster changes last year, mind you. They nailed a lot of the predictions, or a lot of the roster changes that factored into future predictions. They looked great. So I think that I trust their front office for sure. But again, I get back to this idea of like, the league is so competitive that you have some guys who are just looking at everybody passing them by. They're seeing the optics. They're seeing, you know, players who, you know, they think that they're better than. They're seeing teams that, hey, they made a move. Why didn't we? Or, you know, vice versa. And so I think that you're going to see a move. And to be honest, I guess one team that I would possibly expect to make one, if they just aren't, if they place top 12, I think Seattle is one for sure that at least considers it. But who do you go for? Again, I have no idea. There's not really been a whole lot of talk about it, but there's a lot of really talented players in the challenger scene. I know that Wester's kind of changed things up. I don't know.
That was weird.
There's some really talented kids on that team. I think it was Paul X had made this known that he was offered something from London, and because it was only like a 2-week thing, he's like, nope, stay with my roster. It's going to take a lot to get those guys off of the same team. But maybe in the middle of a roster change period, you get a hold of them and say, hey, listen, we're ready to rock. Let's go for it. And then they sign. So again, I think that there's some potential there for sure. Not necessarily with Seattle, but just with overall changes.
Am I tripping? Or did I read a tweet saying that Wester actually, did they fix that? They made a change. Like they dropped Zap or whatever. And so then the team was left with just him, right?
Well, they wanted to drop Zaptius, but he's like the co-founder of Wester. Yeah. So he then turned around and just dropped all of them. So the rest of that team, Gravity, Paul X, Venom, picked up Phantoms, who's been probably the best player overall. So, I mean, when you have those four, that's like you guys stole my thunder, man. I had that in my back pocket. But what I'm thinking, like, if I'm an expansion team, you could just take that roster and plug them in, and I guarantee you're going to beat right off the rip 3 or 4 or maybe even half of these teams in the CDL. I mean, maybe that's a little bit of a stretch, but these dudes are absolutely frying. And you throw Phantoms in there. I mean, if you're London or Seattle, you've got to be looking at it, maybe a potential opportunity like that to get a top elite team at the beginning of their careers. I mean,
yeah, the Subliners academy team is doing pretty good too with Saints and those guys. Like, I mean, there's some good players down there to pick from.
A lot of talented guys. It's actually crazy, like how much talent there is, and how much grinding those players are doing too. Like, I know there's a lot of rosters who scrimmaged before champs, or it was champs grand finals, or it was at some point, and some teams didn't want to scrimmage others, and so they were scrimmaging amateur teams or challenger teams, and they're like, this is some of the best practice we've had all year. And you're like, really? You're playing against players who aren't even in the league. Like, they just know the game. And there were some pickup teams too. You got like 4 guys that just never play, or 5 guys at the time, never play with each other. They just come onto a team and it just meshes. It works. So just to add on to that, I totally agree. I think there's some very, very good players who are available. And I think, all eyes are on the Wester crew and other guys as well. And I think, as an update, I want to say that that's not happening. I think they're keeping the name Wester. I think Zaptius kind of bowed down after that and said, okay, you guys can have the name. So I don't know for a fact. I'm not sitting here acting like I'm reporting on that. But I want to say I saw a tweet that said something like that. I'm not going to pull up methods and just, pull a drama alert or anything. But that's just kind of my interpretation. So.
All right. Well, hey, guys, thanks so much for hanging out with us tonight. I know, listen, Ashley goes away and we just fly off the rails. This started as like a 45, 50-minute podcast. And then the second episode was like an hour. And then Ashley had to miss a couple, and we turned it into like an hour and a half long podcast. And now we're at like 2+ hours, and I don't know what's happening anymore. But LandO, thank you so much for coming on with us. You can see him on Twitter at LandO. He'll be on the CDL feed, of course, all this weekend doing the player interviews and casting, and great job with that stuff, man. It's really cool to follow. I think you do a great job on those interviews. So LandO, thanks so much for coming on with us. If you're new around here, make sure you hit that subscribe button. We won't be doing any co-streams. I don't think we're allowed to do co-streams on the ROKKR YouTube channel throughout the first major, but I do think we're going to pre-record some pre-shows and whatnot. So make sure that you're hanging around for all that stuff. But thank you guys so much for hanging out with us. Kingdom, thanks again. We'll be here same time, same place next week. Look forward to the major. Hope you guys all enjoy watching some Call of Duty, and we will catch you on the next episode of The Rotation.